Yes, I'm sorry. I just realized I forgot to hit record because there's a couple of people that can't make. That's perfect, Andrew. And this actually takes us back to, thanks for bringing that up, Chelsea. It brings us back to the concept of recentering. And so ontology and epistemology kind of go together. Okay, epistemology is your perspective, just like, I don't have to reiterate what Andrew just said. It's the lens by which you view the world or know the world. Okay, and so there was a section in that article where they talk about you need to reorientate or recenter or place persons of color ontologies, their ways, their beliefs, their culture, and their epistemologies, their way of looking at the world, to interrupt Eurocentrism, basically, to interrupt ethnocentric thinking. So that was the whole argument of that article, is the need for us as educators to recenter our teaching and learning environments outside of our ethnocentric perspective and our way of seeing and our way of being. A really simple example I can give you on a personal note on this is, the school I taught at, when the first day I entered that classroom, I'll never forget the first day. I don't know if I shared this story already or not. I apologize if I did. But I grew up in white America. I think I had maybe 2 or 3 classmates of color all through my high school career. College, I had a bit more diversity. My first teaching job was at a Catholic high school that was largely white and had some brown and black students, but very, very white. Then I went off to this other school, the Milton Hershey School, and all of a sudden in front of me is mostly black and brown kids. And I knew from that moment this was a different gig. This was a different world that I had stepped into. And one of the things that I tell my students to this day is that I learned more from them. I continue to learn more from them than they have ever learned from me. And part of that is understanding their ontology, their epistemology, and the world, that how they walk through the world. And what does that mean for my teaching? So does that help, Chelsea?
Yeah, it does. I also read an article, like I just Googled it. I also read an article on ontological subjugation and Black ontology and ontological materialism.
Wow.
And that really helped me, I think, center more of like a working definition. But what you and Andrew just gave me too, like, yes, it helped. It definitely helped. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right. So to recenter means we are very intentional. You think about your social justice ECD educator practices. You're very intentional about your practices, the knowledge bases, the values, the experience that you're building in the classroom. That's how important that is in terms of meeting the needs of students who are very, help disrupting those power dynamics, in essence. Other questions that are dangling out there for you? Okay, good stuff. And so now you're going to take that and keep it and stick with it, and now say, okay, how does this that I've just learned in Module 1 connect to the next thing that I'm going to do? Which now we're starting to delve into community in a different way. So we still have basically the same 2 guiding questions that we were on for Module 1. But I'm going to talk about these readings just briefly, and I want you to read them in this order. If you have started already, that's fine. I want you to read Yosa's Whose Culture Has Capital, a critical race theory discussion on community cultural wealth. So this will extend your understanding of critical race theory. And Yosa identifies, I think, 6 different cultural wealths that typically are not looked at when you look at your students. And it's a fascinating article, and we'll talk about a little bit more about that next week. Not next week, in week 3 intro session of what are those different capitals, cultural capital wealth versus what it is counter to is Bordeaux's work around cultural capital. So I don't know if any of you have heard of Bordeaux or know what you'll learn about Bordeaux in that article. So this is really like kind of a theoretical but a practical article for you as educators to consider these 6 cultural capital, but wealth that Joseph points out, and how you might incorporate that into your teaching. I then want you to go to read a Lua, because I want you to have a Lua read before the PLC on Wednesday. These 3 chapters, we're through the intro, and I hope if I don't know if anybody has started these 3 chapters yet, they're fascinating chapters. I think you'll find them to be very, very quick reads, filled with tons and tons of things to talk about. And that PLC is going to just largely be talking about intersectionality, I'm blanking right now. Checking my privilege. We'll dig into a little bit of that today, to scratch the surface, but we'll go deeper next week. And police brutality, which is kind of pertinent in terms of looking at the world today. So I think you'll find those 3 chapters really, really quick reads. Jot down questions, pull out. There's just wealth of quotes that, so the guided notes kind of give you a direction on that. Blaze and Taylor might be one of my favorite articles. It's using queer theory to rethink gender equity in early childhood education. I am not an ECE educator, but I understand that gender is a critical dynamic that is happening in your classrooms. And I don't know if any of you have read anything about queer theory before. It has nothing to do about queer and being lesbian or gay or bisexual. It's an extension of feminism, of feminist theory. And it gives us a different lens to look at gender. And so I think it's a short article. I think you'll really, I think you'll enjoy it. I know you're like looking at me like, Suzanne, I got 1,000 other things to do in my life. Am I really going to enjoy this article? And then Leafgren, Are You My Dog, is a cool article. Socially and politically marginalized children desiring to be seen and valued by the teachers. It's kind of a first-person account of a teacher in a school. So that's the journey that you'll go on for this particular module. Quick thing about the assignments. I created a ton of confusion. I really, really apologize for that. The guided notes, please do some reading between now and your first PLC, okay? And upload your guided notes in whatever form they're in at that point in time. I will give you feedback, and you can continue to fill those notes in as you go through the rest of the readings. All right, minimally, if you could have Yosa and Alua read by next Wednesday, that would be great. All right. The feedback I give you is simply to guide you in your learning. And if you don't, and to help you build to your mind map and understanding at the end of a module. So if you don't get that to me in a timely manner, I'm not able to get to the feedback for you to think if I have to redirect or say, hey, you need to go back and dig into this. That just get that to me by that Wednesday, and feel free if people went back and responded to my comments and we had exchanges back and forth. That's what I'll do. So I just want to make sure that you're not letting the reading go until you need to do a little bit every week, folks. Okay. I know it's a little bit dangerous for me to give such flexibility and not say everything has to be done by this date. The only drop dead date is the end of a module. Okay, that's a drop dead for a module. But if you're going to save all of your learning for that last week, that's not how you should be engaging in the course. Okay, you're going to have your self-study, observations, and reflection, which is due February 7th. Try to hit that. Sophie Rapallo is a TA for this class, and she's going to be providing. I had Sophie last year, so she has done these assignments for this class. She's very well versed in the class and did a nice job with them last year, and she's going to be providing you feedback on that. The mind map is due February 14th, and This self-evaluation is the Calendly thing that you sign up for a time, 10 minutes, and I get to connect with you. You get to connect with me one-on-one for those 10 minutes. Okay, so that's kind of the map of where we're heading. What I like to do with the rest of our time is just start the conversation about intersectionality and privilege, power, and intersectionality. All right. Alua will give you a definition of privilege. In her book, she talks quite a bit about privilege in that chapter 4, I think it is. And it's here I just have defined it at the systemic level. You can't have privilege. We're not talking about privilege at a personal level. We're talking about privilege at the systems level of how the systems, the social, economic, and political systems work in this country. All right, in the United States. So it's unearned benefits that we get. That chapter 3, Alua does she does a really nice job of laying out her own privileges, and I think gives you some markers to think about how you could do that individually. Power and intersectionality. So some of you didn't have a complete definition of intersectionality from module 1. Hopefully by the end of this module, you'll have a deeper understanding of that. And it says, just as human qualities don't fit into nice little tidy little boxes, neither do our identities. It's a combination of identities that come together, that intersect, that in different situations provide you different levels of privilege or power or not. Okay, and we'll dig into that deeper. So here's what I want you to do. This, and I'm going to put you into. I think I'll do 3 breakout groups since you're. Let's see. That'll be fun. Yeah, we'll do 3 breakout groups. And this, I'll open this up for you. Let me chat this out to you. Okay. Okay. So what you're going to do is, this is from the work of Paul Kibble. He's kind of created what he calls a power continuum. You could kind of look at it, powerful, less powerful. And this is, again, in the United States society. You could almost think of this as a continuum. And I've done this exercise a number of different ways. And I have people put like X's of where they hold power, depending on these categories. You're going to hold power somewhere, a lot of places, but you're not going to hold power in some other places. But before you get into that, keep in mind a couple things, okay? Let me go here at the end first, okay? This simplifies things in a dangerous way, okay? Nothing is simply binary. This side has power, it's shades of gray through this whole thing. So just keep in mind that this is a 2-dimensional piece of paper or document that's simplifying something that is not as simply binary as it is here. And they're put in parallel structures, but they're not parallel issues. All right. So it's like none of the issues, like racism isn't like sexism. Sexism isn't like ageism. They're different. Okay. All these categories have their own little nuances. All right. Separate categories also reinforce misconceptions that the other lines don't include the other. That goes to the intersectionality. Okay, so we don't want to forget that there's an intersectional nature to all this. What I want you to do in your groups is that you can kind of look. I said you can take the document and download it, or you can jot down on your side and kind of like highlight. If I was here, it's like, oh, okay, I'd be highlighting. I have power there. I'm less powerful here. I'm powerful here. I'm powerful here. It's just a snapshot. It's just a picture. Okay, just to kind of start getting you to think about the systems level in the United States. Okay, so it's kind of like, where do you hold power? What questions are coming? You can quick go down through this, and then what questions are coming up for you regarding the basis of power and organization in our society. And this activity provides a way for you to think and talk about how different groups of people in the U.S. experience power and oppression. What noticings do you have about different social groups? I know in the PLC that I led last week, and it came up in your on your guided notes. It's like, how the heck do I engage people in conversations? Now that was specific to race, but you might find an entry point here in some other ways to get people to understand things at a systems level of how our society works. Maybe starting with race isn't the brightest idea to do. Maybe there's a way of an entry point in another one of these kind of systemic structures where privilege and power are being held. Okay, so dig in, just kind of dig into this, take a look at it, and engage in a conversation with your group. I'm going to give you about 7 minutes, okay, to do this, and I'll break it into groups of 3. Breakout groups. Here we go. Let's recreate. Yeah, I think 3 ought to do it. Okay. All right. So there you go. Open all rooms. Okay. Allie, I think you can hit enter a room if you're waiting to go in. Or did I lose Allie? There we go. Thoughts, things. I went into each room and it was really great conversations in all 3 rooms. What's kind of struck you in regards to your conversations or kind of looking at these dynamics?
Everyone felt a lot of pressure to identify themselves quickly, and that was very tough.
Yeah. Sorry, we don't have enough. This is something I would do at a workshop, but I'd spend like a whole, at least like a half, like a morning one, breaking all this down.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I feel like we barely just got into it. It was like there's so much you can look at.
I think the really notable juxtaposition is that of like personal power versus systemic power, right? Because as individuals, especially within our particular contexts and within the modern political and social climate, it's very difficult to feel powerful. It's extremely difficult to feel powerful as an individual. And so that juxtaposed with the recognition of the sort of, the way I put it was that like, it's a power and a privilege if you've never had to think about it before, right? So just the putting those 2 contexts side by side is seemed to be part of the focus of our discussion.
Something I mentioned just briefly in my group, and something that I've been feeling more and more confident talking about, is in my life, based on my own religion and ethnic background, I would have never considered myself oppressed, and I have a really hard time talking about that as a heterosexual, straight, cisgendered white woman. Also being Jewish is something that I've never felt until recently, being in a position and to really open my eyes to a lot of people in that less powerful column of the daily struggles. And and I think this class is kind of serendipitous of where it fell and in our political climate, like Andrew said, where like it's really opening my eyes to just how systemic and how inbred what we consider white supremacy to be, and like what all of these characteristics and power and privilege really look like, more than just skin color.
Yeah, and we were at the end of our group, I was bringing up a the idea of like saliency, that certain identities will feel more salient at certain contexts. So like for me being a woman, when I'm walking home alone at night, somewhere I don't know where I am, my identity as a woman is like going to be really salient. Or if I walk into a room and there is no one that looks like me, the identities that I feel aren't represented are going to feel more salient for me. So I think that is also like in Alua's book talking about how, you know, white people don't have to think about race because the spaces we enter are usually white. The media is like representing us. And so that our different identities are always changing of what we're feeling and seeing based on the things that are around us.
Anyone else? All really great points. The saliency one, yeah, it changes in your whole life. It shifts around, and you know, even the political um, dynamics can change that saliency. You know, for individuals. So it's just something to be really to stay, you know, kind of in tune with, in touch with. Yeah.
It is interesting.
Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
I was just gonna say, like, yeah, my entire life I've identified as like a straight white cisgendered male, and then you throw me into an ECE context, and it's like, I definitely feel fish out of water sometimes.
And just so you know, this is not an exhaustive list at all. Okay, there are, in fact, Alua will talk about some other characteristics or categories that are really, really important in our society that are not on this list. So that systemic conversation, you know, it's like, that's to me the whole point of the self-study, to continue to help you hone your critical lens of the world at the systemic level. Yeah, 10% does seem high for ECE. I just saw the chat there. I have to say to Andrew and Ben, I had 0 men in the class last spring when I taught this course. You know, this is probably the high watermark for me, and whenever I taught a Boulder journey course. So thank you for being there. So
Every classroom I've been in, it's like, oh, sorry.
yeah, no, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Just every classroom I've been in, it's a coin flip. It's either like parents who are really put off by it and really don't feel comfortable with it, or parents who think it's the greatest thing in the world.
Wow,
Like,
I would have not
so
thought about
I'm
parents
almost
like
prejudged. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating.
Yeah, it can get weird. Yeah.
Well,
Just as a man around young children in general, like.
Yeah, I had a parent this year, which now it's totally different, but originally at the beginning of the year, she told my co-teacher, she was like, I don't want Ben to change my daughter's diaper.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, okay, like that's fine. I respect that. That's fine. I won't do it. But inside I was like, okay, all right. Now it's a totally different situation now that she's gotten to know me and everything. But initially I was like, okay. Just
So
having
that's
that like initial
a flipped gender dynamic.
Yeah.
Interesting. So going back to systemic, really pushing yourself at that systemic level for these things. Invisibility of identities. The fact there are a number of characteristics on here that are invisible. So you can glide through, and then there are others that are not invisible that have a tremendous impact on as you walk through the world, through our society. Guys are having fun in the chat. All right, let me share my screen to talk about one thing that is not visible in this. And I think it's important to understand. And that is something to be looking for or thinking about, and that's exploitation and structural inequalities. Okay. This chart really obscures the economic structures of our that frame frame our lives. Okay, the 1% can flip through this world and not have any, visible. They have no worries whatsoever. They're not visible. Everything we do not interact with them. Okay, we don't. I don't live with them. We don't work with them. I don't know to what extent you play or go out with them. They really are, but yet they hold a tremendous amount of power in our society. So we need to understand exploitation to get at the systems level. You need to go deeply into your understanding on how is like the appropriation of land in our, it's happening, it's still happening today, but even at the birth of our nation, labor, the exploitation of labor in our society, again, etched in from day one, but continues to this day. The interesting thing about, if you know anything about the Mexican, the immigration and emigration of Mexicans, we wanted them when we were at war and we needed them to work our fields, and then the men came back from war and they said, get out of here, we don't want you anymore. Oh wait, we need you to come back again and work, so there's this whole history around labor movements in the United States and the exploitation of particularly different types of labor still happening today. Reproduction exploitation, and you can look at even the sex trafficking, and that whole world, underground world, cultural and spiritual practices, the exploitation of those folks. So that's where you really get a deeper, more developed understanding of things at the systemic level. Yeah, most real life isms come from groups fighting against some kind of exploitation. That, so if you don't know the history, then I'd encourage you to seek out that history and seek out that understanding. And so we need to analyze the forms of exploitation, or we really risk, you can't get to the systemic level unless you understand this. That's the key. Okay. Multiple identities on the chart diminish the importance of class, and it obscures where organized sources of power exist, because a lot of this is tied up in money and corporations. And so I just wanted to kind of point that out. This melds nicely into, I want to talk about the self-study and observations that you're going to be doing. There are 4. The first one's this module. I do require that you do 1 week of gender and 1 week of race out of those 4 opportunities. I don't care if you want to do 2 gender, 2 race, 3 race, 1 gender. I don't care if that's all you want to stick with. You also, I have a list. Well, here are others that you can look at. This isn't all inclusive. If there's another one that you prefer to take a look at, another dynamic, go ahead and do it. But I do want you to do at least one of those 4. You have to do race, and 1 you have to do gender, because gender, I feel, is so important to ECE educators, and race, I think, is just so important to our society in general. Okay, so you have to do 4. Pick what you want. Do those 2. What are you going to do? The whole purpose of this is to really examine and really get you thinking about your own attitudes, beliefs, and assumptions that you have, and the knowledge that you have or you do not have, in regards to how the system works for certain groups of people and doesn't in the characteristic that you're picking. Okay, how does the dynamics that are just embedded deeply into our society. So what are you going to do? You want to pick a focus. You want to make daily observations, 5 days. Okay. I prefer that they be in a row, but if you can't quite make it in a row, all that does is it just extends it. So I'd say get it done. But if you need to take a day off, take a day off. You're going to record observations through the day. So I don't know what that means to you. In the good old days for me, it would be like a notebook that I'd have, and I just jot things down as I go through the day. Some of you have technological expertise on the telephone, and not on a telephone, on a cell phone that far exceeds my skill set. So you could possibly do it there, or if you had a tablet or whatever. I don't care how you take the notes. I want you to take the notes in the moment. Okay. And you can turn in for your notes, you can turn in a JPEG picture of your notes. All right. So if you decide to do it in a notebook, that's fine. Just so I can read it, just so it's, you're somebody in this group. I don't know. Somebody has beautiful handwriting. Who was that? It was gorgeous handwriting on the class map. I don't remember who it was anymore. It was like, oh, I wish I had that.
That's probably Angelina. I think she has really good handwriting. Really, I've seen her handwriting. I'm like, that's calligraphy.
It's amazing. So you're going to record the time, the observation, and that's it. During the day, just time observation. Get to the end of the day, and this should be throughout the day, okay, morning through evening. You don't need to make 20 observations, but more than 5 would, 5 or more would be, nice throughout the day, because this is a real hyper focus. This is a hyper focus that you're doing for these 5 days on whatever identity that you pick. You should be making them through your daily life, at work, socially, although I guess there's not a lot of social stuff going on these days. Media, how you're taking, whether it's the media you're consuming, what are you noticing, what are you hearing? You're going to add to your, so here's like a sample chart, and you're going to add to your, at the end of the day, or you can do it at the moment if you want, but I'd say at the end of the day, go back. You do not need a reflective note for every one of your observations, just the ones that you think are most poignant. You're going to just go back and you're just going to add add to your observations. How do you see and are learning to see the social characteristic of your focus as a component of the larger systemic network? Again, this is at the systems level. Last year, a lot of people say, well, how can I do race in Boulder? Oh, it's all over. Okay. It might not be you might not be seeing a lot of Black and brown folks, but the way Boulder County works, it is just, you walk the world in terms of race in Boulder. It's just the flip side of thinking about that. Which gets at the systemic level. You should add individual reflections to specific observations here. Not all observations need reflective notes. Just pick out the ones that really kind of got you to stop and pause and think, and just put a little note in there for that. Okay. Then what you're going to do at the end of the 5 days, you're going to pick a guiding question, not the course essential question. Okay, pick a guiding question, like for instance, where are they? Up here. Okay. Maybe it's one of these two, perhaps. There's a third one too that deals with community. Okay, so you're going to pick one of the guiding questions, and you are going to, where am I? Make sure you say what question you're responding to, and then how did your observations and daily reflections extend your understanding of the guiding question, or how did you continue to see intersectionality, or how your own beliefs and assumptions are kind of bubbling up in terms of you as a teacher and a person at the systemic level. Does that make sense? So,
Suzanne,
yeah.
Is this on the shell? All of this is on the shell?
Yeah, so this right here, if I would have clicked on that link, You have an assignment guide that basically has everything on that I just said. I just broke it up into some slides. Okay. Oh, the other thing that doesn't, it's in here that wasn't, I actually in the assignment guide, I just put an example of like observations. I'm not saying these are like perfect observations. It's just examples of what some folks have done, and you can see different contexts. It's kind of hard right now, the world we're living in, to go and plop yourself down in a different context than what you're used to and just sit there and make observations. So maybe it's through media or some other way that you just, the idea is to just really, the purpose of the self-study, just like Chen, actually we can go back to here, an intentional and systematic inquiry of one's own practice, reflection on action, and for action. And what we're looking at, the purpose of these observations is so hopefully you're getting better and better and better at seeing the systemic dynamics of a particular identity and how it plays itself out in our society. Recognizing that there is an intersectionality component to this, but the idea is, let's focus on race. Let's hope, for 5 days, let's just, what am I hearing? Interesting enough, that Leafgren article will help you with the race component, because there's some things that are said there that are like, it'll shock you, that some, well, maybe not, that teachers have said, the comments that are in that article. That's the point of these, to really fine tune and continue to hone your skills so that maybe you start feeling a little bit better about entering into a conversation with somebody else that just might not be quite where you're at, with a particular dynamic that's happening in our society. And actually going back to the Coward continuum, is there one of these, this is like, is there one of these that is like, I might be able to talk to my parents about that. I might be able to enter into a conversation about cisgender, transgender. I've had to do a lot of work with my parents around transgender. And it's just little baby steps because it's all new to them. My parents are 86 years old. Transgender is blowing their mind. And so they just need to engage in conversations around that. It's just one example. Questions? Two different resources here, feel free to look at them or not. Paul Kibble has this really brilliant piece on white benefits assessment. He used to call it, the old version of this was called white affirmative action. And this really, he takes stock of his own family and the advantages that they had in their society, that were not available to particularly Black folks. And so he goes through this really, it's a history that maybe some of you don't know, so it might be worth a while for you to take a look at. The other, this is something that you might have done in another class. Peggy McIntosh has this knapsack. Are any of you familiar with this? Yeah. If you're not, this is another good one to take. It's just question or statements, and you can go through and say, yeah, I can, if I wish, arrange to be in the company of people of my race most of the time. And it just goes through a whole bunch of statements that you can read through and check off, and it kind of, I think, helps contextualize things at a systemic level if you're still trying to kind of sort that through. Both of these pieces are really interesting if you're not familiar with them. You might want to take, particularly maybe when you decide to do the race one, you might want to just read through these just to kind of hone your thinking a little bit going into those observations. Final questions? Just reminder of what's coming up.
Suzanne, this might become clear when I look on the course shell, but when I'm envisioning this self-reflection, if we pick race, for instance, we're doing race for 5 days, not race and then gender and then something else. Okay.
Right, right.
And,
Yeah, go ahead. Race for 5 days. Yep.
okay. And then for this module, it's all race, or do we do race for 5 days, gender for 5 days?
You pick, for this module, you do one, and you pick it. Last year I taught this. This was a new assignment to me. I hadn't done it before, and I was telling people what to do, and I didn't like that. I'd rather, what I am telling you is that you have to do race once and gender once. Pick whatever else you want to do and pick the order that you want to do it. But each module, you do one per module. Okay.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yep. Other questions?
And for only 5 days in this module, right?
Yep.
Not 15 days.
No. 5 days. Like you could start it, you know, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you know, whatever works best for you. And like I said, if you need to skip a day, fine, but it's like, you know, do it and get the observations, and then you can take a day or so and do your final reflection.
Do you want us to keep all the observations on one chart, and like maybe like skip one line and then for like the next day start a new line?
Yeah, just identify the new day.
Okay.
Yep. Anything else? Oh, well, thank you for a great conversation, and I'm really looking forward to the PLC next week. I think, you know, if you haven't read those 3 chapters, I think you'll find some interesting, they're very interesting. Okay, and don't forget to sign up on Calendly for a check-in. You're doing great. Keep it up, and look forward to seeing you. Some of you, I'll see you next week. Okay. Hope I'll stop share. Have a good one.